The security cameras were supposed to record everything. 24/7 coverage of every hallway, every room, every corner of the Riverside Medical Center. But there were 12 minutes every night when they all went dark. And during those 12 minutes, something walked the halls that wasn't supposed to exist. I know because I was there. I was the night security guard who discovered what happened during the blackouts, and what I found out nearly cost me my sanity. I was 29 when I took the job. Fresh out of the military, struggling with PTSD, couldn't handle crowds or noise. The overnight security position seemed perfect. Quiet building, minimal human contact, decent pay. Just me, the cameras, and the occasional nurse finishing a late shift. Riverside Medical was one of those old hospitals built in the 1960s. 7 floors of sterile corridors and flickering fluorescent lights. During the day, it bustled with activity, but at night it became something else entirely. Empty. Hollow. The kind of place where every footstep echoed and shadows seemed to move on their own. My supervisor, Carl, was a heavy-set guy in his 50s who'd been working security there for 15 years. On my first night, he walked me through the routine. Pretty straightforward, he said, showing me the wall of monitors in the security office. These cameras cover everything. Every hallway, every patient room, all the common areas. Your job is to watch these screens and do hourly rounds. Nothing ever happens, but corporate requires someone here. He paused at monitor 7, which showed the pediatric ward on the 4th floor. This one goes out sometimes. Old wiring. If it cuts out, don't worry about it. Maintenance knows about the issue. How often does it happen, I asked. Carl shrugged. Couple times a week, always between 3:17 and 3:29 a.m., exactly 12 minutes, like clockwork. That should have been my first red flag. The first few nights were exactly what Carl promised. Boring. I'd watch Netflix on my phone, check the monitors every few minutes, do my rounds. The building was peaceful, almost meditative, just the hum of ventilation systems and the distant beeping of medical equipment. Then came my first blackout. 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I was reading an article on my phone when I noticed the silence. I looked up and monitor 7 was dark. Black screen, no signal. Just like Carl said. But as I sat there, something felt wrong. The other monitors showed empty hallways, but there was a tension in the air I couldn't explain. Like the building itself was holding its breath. At 3:29 exactly, monitor 7 flickered back to life. 4th floor pediatric ward, empty hallway, same as always. I made a note in the log, monitor 7 outage, 3:07 to 3:29 a.m., no incidents. The second blackout happened 3 nights later. Same time, same monitor. But this time I was watching more carefully. At 3:28, just before the feed came back online, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move across the screen. Just for a second, like someone walking quickly past the camera. I rewound the footage, nothing there, just empty hallway. I started timing my rounds to coincide with the blackouts. Every time monitor 7 went dark, I'd position myself near the 4th floor stairwell. I never saw anything, but the feeling was always the same. That electric sense of not being alone. 2 weeks into the job, I met Sarah Chen, one of the night nurses. She was finishing her shift around 4 a.m. when I was doing rounds. "You're the new security guy," she said. Pleasant smile, but tired eyes. "How do you like it so far?" "Quiet," I said. "Just the way I prefer it." Her expression changed slightly. "You haven't noticed anything unusual?" "Like what?" She hesitated. "Probably nothing, just sometimes the 4th floor feels different at night, colder. The patients in pediatrics mention strange things sometimes." "What kind of strange things?" "A woman in white who visits them, always between 3 and 4 a.m. The kids describe her the same way, tall, pale, no face where her face should be. They're never scared of her though. They say she makes them feel better." My skin crawled. "Have you ever seen her?" Sarah shook her head. "No, but I've felt her. Sometimes when I'm doing rounds on 4, I'll get this overwhelming sense of sadness, like someone crying just out of earshot." That night, I paid closer attention to the other monitors during the blackout. At 3:17, monitor 7 went dark as usual. But at 3:22, I noticed something on monitor 12, the main 4th floor hallway. A figure in white, walking slowly down the corridor. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. It looked like a woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform. Long white dress, white cap, but something was wrong with the image. She seemed to glide rather than walk, and the camera couldn't quite focus on her face. I grabbed my radio and called it in. Possible intruder on 4th floor, investigating. I ran to the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. When I reached the 4th floor, the hallway was empty. I checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. Back in the security office, I rewound the footage. The figure was gone. No trace she'd ever been there. I started digging into the hospital's history. What I found made everything click into place. In 1987, there had been a fire on the 4th floor. Electrical malfunction in the pediatric ward. 7 children died, along with 1 nurse who refused to evacuate without them. Nurse Margaret Holloway, 26 years old, found in the medication room, overcome by smoke inhalation. The investigation revealed she'd been going room to room, getting the sickest children to safety first. She'd saved 12 kids before the smoke got her. I found her photograph in an old hospital newsletter. Tall, pale, kind eyes, wearing the exact white uniform I'd seen on the monitor. The fire had started at 3:17 a.m. The next night, I was ready. I positioned a handheld camera in the 4th floor hallway, hidden behind a plant. If the monitors weren't recording during the blackouts, maybe an independent camera would catch something. 3:17 came and went. Monitor 7 went dark. At 3:22, I saw her again on monitor 12. This time I didn't run upstairs. I just watched. She moved through the hallway with purpose, stopping at each room. Even though I couldn't see her clearly on the security feed, I could tell she was checking on something or someone in each room. At 3:29, she faded away just as monitor 7 came back online. I retrieved my hidden camera the next morning. When I reviewed the footage, my hands were shaking. There she was, clear as day. Margaret Holloway, still in her 1987 nurse's uniform, still making her rounds, still taking care of children, 35 years after her death. But here's the thing that really got to me. She wasn't alone. Behind her, barely visible but definitely there, were 7 small figures, children, following her like she was leading them somewhere safe. I should have been terrified, should have quit on the spot, but watching that footage, all I felt was profound sadness. This woman had died trying to save children, and somehow she was still trying, still doing her job, still protecting the kids on the 4th floor. I made a decision that probably cost me my career, but felt right in my soul. I stopped reporting the monitor outages. Instead, I started leaving small offerings in the pediatric ward, flowers from the gift shop, a cup of coffee on the nurse's station, a note that said, "Thank you for watching over them." The offerings were always gone by morning. 3 months later, I was doing my rounds when I encountered her directly. I'd come up to check on a 7-year-old girl who'd been admitted with pneumonia. Her parents couldn't stay overnight, and she'd been crying for hours. I was walking past her room when I saw Margaret standing by the child's bed, humming softly. The little girl was finally asleep, peaceful for the first time all night. Margaret looked up and saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her face was kind but infinitely sad. Then she nodded once, like she was acknowledging me, and faded away. I never saw her again after that night. The monitor 7 blackout stopped completely. Whatever she'd been trying to accomplish, I think she finally did it. I left the security job a few months later, couldn't handle the isolation anymore, and frankly, the building felt empty without her presence. But I still drive by Riverside Medical sometimes, and every time I do, I look up at the 4th floor windows and whisper a thank you. Some people say ghosts are trapped souls, unable to move on, but I think Margaret Holloway chose to stay, not because she was trapped, but because there were still children who needed protecting, still rounds to make, still a job to do. And maybe after 35 years of service, she finally earned her rest. The pediatric ward at Riverside was renovated last year. New security system, new cameras, state-of-the-art everything. But the night nurses still report the same thing Sarah told me all those years ago. Some people say ghosts are trapped souls, unable to move on. But I think Margaret Holloway chose to stay. Not because she was trapped, but because there were still children who needed protecting. Still rounds to make, still a job to do. And maybe after 35 years of service, she finally earned her rest. The pediatric ward at Riverside was renovated last year. New security system, new cameras, state-of-the-art everything. But the night nurses still report the same thing Sarah told me all those years ago. Sometimes late at night, when a child is scared or sick or missing their parents, they feel a presence in the room. Gentle, caring, protective. A woman in white, still making her rounds, still taking care of the children. Some jobs are more than just jobs. Some people are more than just people. And some kinds of love are stronger than death. The apartment was supposed to be brand new. Fresh construction, they said. 23rd floor of a glass tower in downtown Phoenix. But I found something behind the drywall that had been there long before they poured the foundation. And what I discovered wasn't from this century. Look, I know how this sounds, like some bullshit urban legend you'd read on Reddit at 2 a.m., but I've got receipts, hospital records, police reports, a therapist who's been trying to help me make sense of it for 8 months now. I was 31 when it happened. Just landed my dream job at a tech startup after years of grinding in customer service hell. Finally had enough saved up to ditch my roommate situation and get my own place. The apartment was everything I wanted. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, smart home everything. The rent was steep but manageable, and the building was so new it still smelled like paint and fresh carpet. The leasing agent walked me through like she was selling me a Ferrari. Brand new building, she kept saying. First tenant in this unit. You're basically christening it. First week was perfect. I worked remote, ordered too much DoorDash, binged Netflix on my massive new TV. Living the dream, right? Then the Wi-Fi started cutting out. Not a big deal initially. New building, probably still working out the kinks, but it was always in the same spot, the bedroom wall that backed up to the hallway. Stand anywhere near that wall and boom, no signal. Move 3 feet away and full bars. I called the building's tech support. They sent a guy up who took one look at his signal meter and got this weird expression. "That's not normal," he said, walking the length of the wall with his device. "It's like there's something metallic running through here. Something big." He left without fixing anything. That night I heard the tapping. Soft at first, like someone gently knocking on the other side of the wall. Tap, 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 always in sets of 3. Always around 3 a.m. I figured it was pipes or the building settling. New construction, you know. But after a week of the same pattern, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, I got curious. And when you're wide awake at 3 in the morning with nothing but your paranoid thoughts, curious turns into obsessed pretty quick. I started pressing my ear to the wall during the tapping. That's when I realized it wasn't random. There was a rhythm. Almost like Morse code. So I downloaded an app, spent 3 nights transcribing the pattern. When I finally decoded it, my blood went cold. Help me, help. Over and over, same message. I should have called the building manager, should have demanded they check the wall. Instead, I did something stupid. I went to Home Depot, bought a stud finder and a small sledgehammer, and decided to investigate myself. The stud finder went crazy near that wall. Not just finding wooden beams, it was picking up metal everywhere. Dense metal. Like rebar, but in patterns that made no sense for modern construction. I found a spot between 2 studs and made a small hole, just to peek, see what was behind there. The drywall was thicker than normal, way thicker. And when I finally broke through, the smell that hit me was like opening a tomb. Stale air that hadn't moved in decades. Maybe longer. I shined my phone's flashlight through the hole and saw space. A narrow gap that shouldn't exist. The building's architectural plans showed solid concrete behind that wall. Nothing else. Against every rational thought in my head, I made the hole bigger. Big enough to squeeze through. The space was maybe 3 feet wide, but stretched the entire length of the building. Like a secret hallway running parallel to the main corridor. The floor was covered in dust so thick it muffled my footsteps. And the walls. Jesus, the walls. They were covered in scratches. Deep gouges in the concrete made by something sharp, or maybe fingernails. Lots of them. Desperate, frantic scratching that went from floor to ceiling. But that wasn't the worst part. About halfway down this hidden passage, I found objects. Personal belongings scattered on the floor like they'd been dropped and forgotten. A leather wallet, cracked and dry. A wedding ring. A pair of wire-rimmed glasses. And they were old. Not just old, ancient. The wallet had a driver's license from 1952. The glasses had a prescription slip tucked in the case dated 1948. How the hell were 40-year-old belongings sealed inside a wall of a building that was supposed to be brand new? I kept walking. The passage seemed to go on forever, disappearing into darkness beyond my phone's light. That's when I noticed the scratches in the concrete weren't random. They were words, names, dates. Margaret Wells, 1951. Joseph Martinez, 1949. Helen Cooper, 1953. Dozens of them, all from the 1940s and 50s, all scratched into the wall like epitaphs. My phone died right then, complete blackout. I fumbled for the way back in absolute darkness, heart hammering against my ribs. Took me 20 minutes of feeling along the walls to find the hole I'd made. When I finally squeezed back into my apartment, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone charger. First thing I did was Google those names. Margaret Wells, missing person, Phoenix, 1951, never found. Joseph Martinez, disappeared, Phoenix, 1949. Case went cold. Helen Cooper, vanished, Phoenix, 1953. No leads. Every single name I'd seen scratched in that wall belonged to someone who'd vanished without a trace in the late 1940s and early 1950s. All from Phoenix. All unsolved cases. I spent the next 3 days researching, barely sleeping. Turns out there was a whole cluster of disappearances during that time period. Mostly young adults. Mostly people who lived alone or were new to the city. The cases all went cold. No bodies ever found. And here's the thing that made my skin crawl. The land where my building now stood used to be a hotel. The Desert Rose Inn, built in 1947, burned down under mysterious circumstances in 1954. The fire happened right after the last reported disappearance. I found old newspaper clippings. The fire was ruled suspicious, but never solved. The owner, a guy named Edmund Thorne, died in the blaze. But here's what the papers didn't mention, what I found in police archives that took some serious digging to access. Thorne was suspected of running some kind of illegal operation out of the hotel. Witnesses reported strange sounds at night, people going into rooms and never coming out. The police were planning to raid the place when it conveniently burned to the ground. They found 17 sets of human remains in the ashes, but they never found where the victims had been kept. Until now. That hidden passage wasn't part of my building's construction. It was part of the old hotel's foundation. When they built the new tower, they just built right over it, sealed it up, left it as a tomb. I called the police, told them everything. They came out, looked through the hole I'd made, and within an hour the building was swarming with cops and FBI agents. They found more than just scratches and old belongings in that passage. Way more. 17 sets of remains, exactly matching the number found after the hotel fire. But these weren't burned. These people had died in that hidden space, trapped, starved. The FBI's working theory is that Thorne built the passage as a hiding place for his victims. When the heat got too intense, he torched the hotel to cover his tracks. But he didn't count on the foundation surviving. Didn't count on someone eventually finding his secret graveyard. The case made national news. Cold cases from 70 years ago finally closed. Families got answers, even if those families were mostly grandchildren and great-grandchildren by now. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. After they cleared out the remains and sealed up the passage permanently, I thought it would be over. The tapping would stop, the Wi-Fi would work, everything would go back to normal. It didn't. Now I hear voices, whispers through the wall at night, not asking for help anymore, thanking me. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for bringing us home. Thank you for setting us free. The building management offered to move me to a different unit. I said no. Those people waited 70 years for someone to find them. The least I can do is make sure they're never forgotten again. I put up a small memorial in my living room, 17 candles, one for each victim. I light them every night at 3 a.m., right around the time the tapping used to start. The voices are gentler now, peaceful. Sometimes when I'm having a really bad day, I swear I can feel them looking out for me, like they're returning the favor. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I know. But if you ever move into a new place and something doesn't feel right, If you hear sounds that shouldn't be there or find spaces that don't match the floor plan, pay attention. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it's just waiting for someone brave enough or stupid enough to dig it up. The house was supposed to be a single story. At least that's what the floor plan said. But I found a door that led down into something else, and what was down there wasn't meant for people to see. I know it sounds like a creepypasta, but I swear this actually happened. I filed a police report. There's documentation, but to this day, no one's ever explained it. I was 25 when it happened, fresh off a messy divorce. No kids, no house, no real plan, just a suitcase and a gnawing ache that wouldn't go away. I wanted quiet, somewhere I could breathe, somewhere people didn't exist. That's when I found it. A cheap cabin in the woods of Vermont, listed for rent. Way too cheap, honestly. The owner messaged me directly and just said, 1 floor, no basement. If you're looking for peace, it's the right place. It took 3 hours of driving through leaf-choked roads to get there. The place was surrounded by trees. No neighbors, no cell service, just wind and silence. The first 2 days were perfect. I wrote, I walked, I healed. The third night I heard footsteps. They were faint but unmistakable, coming from right beneath the floorboards, slow, deliberate steps pacing under me. I sat up in bed, heart thumping. The house didn't have a basement. It couldn't. I checked. It was built flat on the ground with nothing underneath. I told myself it was a raccoon or something. But then, the chandelier in the kitchen started swaying. No windows were open. No breeze. Just a steady, eerie sway. I spent the next day exploring every inch of the house. That's when I noticed something in the storage room. The carpet in the corner was lifted slightly. I pulled it back and found a wooden square, like a hatch door, nailed shut from the top. The nails looked old, rusted. Someone had gone out of their way to seal it. Curiosity won. I shouldn't have, but I pried the nails loose with a crowbar from my truck. One by one. It took nearly an hour. When the hatch creaked open, the smell hit me first. Damp earth, rot, and something metallic, like old blood. I shined my flashlight down. Nothing but darkness and a wooden ladder disappearing into the void. Against every instinct, I climbed down. The room beneath the house was about half the size of the cabin, dug right into the earth. Dirt walls, no insulation, just mud, mildew, and silence. But the walls, they were covered in drawings. Messy, desperate scribbles, faceless people, disfigured bodies, words scrawled in a language I didn't recognize. And in the middle of the room stood an old, rusted bed frame with green molded leather restraints still attached at each corner. I froze. Something about the air changed. Heavy, charged, wrong. Then the flashlight flickered, and from the farthest corner I heard it, a whisper. Close, too close. Another one. I spun around. Nothing. But I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't alone. I bolted to the ladder and climbed. Just as I reached the top, bang! The hatch slammed shut above me. I screamed, shoved, pushed. Nothing. It was sealed tight from the outside, but I was the only one there. For 5 straight minutes I pounded and begged. Then, it opened. Just like that. I stumbled out, slammed the hatch closed, shoved a bookshelf over it, and sat there shaking until morning. I called the cops first thing. 2 officers came out. I showed them the room, or at least, I tried. The hatch was gone. Just solid floorboards. No seams, no nails, no sign it had ever existed. They gave me that look, the one people give when they think you've lost it, and left. But I wasn't done. I drove straight to the county records office, pulled the blueprints. No basement, never had one. The entire property was marked as slab on grade. But I found something else. The previous owner, Robert M., had been arrested years ago, suspected of abducting children, released due to lack of evidence. 9 kids had gone missing in the area over 10 years. In the file was a drawing found in his house during the investigation. It showed a dirt room, a bed, symbols on the wall. It was the same room I had seen. That night, my last night in the house, I had a dream. I was lying on that rusted bed. I couldn't move. Around me stood 9 children, their eyes gone. Just dark, hollow sockets staring at me in complete silence. Then one of them leaned down, lips barely moving. "You found us, but you can't leave." I woke up drenched in sweat. It was still dark. But I wasn't alone. The floor was covered in wet footprints. Small, muddy prints, child-sized, leading from the hatch to my bed. The hatch I had sealed, the one that supposedly didn't exist. I grabbed my stuff and ran, left everything behind. I never went back. A year later, I saw an article. The cabin had been struck by lightning and burned to the ground. Total loss. But the report mentioned something strange. The foundation, just that one corner, was untouched. Everything else was ash. I still have one photo, a picture I took of that rusted bed before I left. At first it was just that, a bed in a dirt room. But now, each time I look at it, there's something else. First time, empty. Second time, one shadow in the corner. Third, 2. Fourth. I don't look anymore. If you ever rent an old house and hear something beneath your feet late at night, don't open the door. Some doors were never meant to be opened.